Hey you guys, welcome back to my channel and welcome back to another video in eyeshadow palette week, where every single day for 7 days I am posting eyeshadow related content. I'm really excited for today's video. I'm going to be talking to you about my 12 top most favorite palettes of literal all time. I didn't allow myself to choose any palettes that have not been in my collection for at least a year or more, and it was hard for me to narrow it down, but truly, like, these 12 palettes I love so much. You'll see a lot of use throughout them. Many of them have pan, and they're just like all-time favorites. So I have 12 palettes to share with you today. If you're interested, stay tuned. First, if you have yet to subscribe to my channel and you like project panning content, palette themed content, or just chit-chatting about makeup, I would love if you'd consider subscribing before moving on. And other than that, let's get into my top 12 favorite palettes of all time. All right guys, before we get started, I want you to leave me your comments with some of your favorite palettes of all times, of all time. I want to read through them, see what palettes I need to purchase next. And I just realized, like, speaking this into existence, I'm like, one of my favorite palettes of all time probably would have to go to the Tartelette in Bloom, but I don't currently own that in my collection, and it's not in the 12 palettes I'm going to be sharing. But just a side note, the Tartelette in Bloom is probably an all-time favorite as well. I don't even know like what order to like go. Like, I'm looking through these palettes and I'm like, I love you all so much. Okay, let's start with probably one of the newest to my collection, and that's going to be the Artist Couture Supreme Nudes palette. This has been in my palette for just over a year, and I am like obsessed with the Artist Couture formula. I love his palettes. I love his packaging. I love this color story. I love how easy these shadows are to blend. You're gonna notice a lot of my all-time favorites are just like warm brown neutral palettes, and that's just like the type of bee I am. Like, I just love me a good warm brown neutral palette. So those are obviously going to be my all-time favorites. If you're looking for a video about colorful palettes, this is unfortunately not the day or not the place for that. But I do have like colorful palettes I love. They're just not all-time favorites. I just absolutely adore the Artist Couture formula. I also love the Supreme Bronze, but the Supreme Nudes just speaks to like my everyday year-round vibe and aesthetic. So I had to give it to this one. Another one that joined my collection towards the beginning of last year is the Nabla Side-by-Side palette, but I could have told you before this even got to me, this was gonna turn into an all-time favorite. This is really similar to the Soft Glam palette from ABH, but one of you pointed out that I didn't realize until I started to like compare the two, that this is also very similar. This is like if ABH Soft Glam as well as ABH Sultry like meshed and had a baby. And how beautiful a thing, because I love the ABH Sultry. You're gonna see that in today's video, and I used to love the Soft Glam, but I decluttered that because it was so similar to this. You guys know I'm obsessed with Nabla Cosmetics, so there's that. I love that there are so many just different textures and different formulas in their palettes, but I find that all of them are fairly easy to work with. My least favorite would be their latex formula, but that is not in this palette. I love the color story. I love these pops of like warm pinky golds, but all around just an all-time favorite palette. Next up I have this one from Kaleidos. This one has been, I think I purchased this in the summer of 2020, I think. This is the Sashimi City palette, and I just actually like adore this palette so much. I love the color story. I love the two shimmers in this. They are very punchy, very metallic, but if you like that style of makeup, or if you like that look, you will love this palette if this is like your color story. This is probably the most neutral of all of my Kaleidos palettes, but I love the Kaleidos formula. Again, very easy to work with, very blendable. The shadows don't muddy together by any means. I just find the ease of use is like, I just love. I also love the packaging. I truly love everything about this palette, and this will forever probably be an all-time favorite. Okay, this next palette, when I first purchased this, I was like, I don't feel like this is worth the money. Like, I like the palette, but I don't think it's worth the money. But truly over time, I don't know what I would do if I did not have this palette, and it is the Pat McGrath Bronze Seduction palette. Now, I will say I feel like with any Pat McGrath palette, I would just wait until you can get it on sale, whether it be the Sephora VIB sale, or Pat McGrath runs some pretty good sales on her palettes throughout the course of the year. So just wait to get things on sale. But I freaking adore this palette. I love the matte browns. Sometimes with the Pat McGrath Mothership palettes, I'm like, okay, I just like want the special shades. I don't need the mattes, but I actually do really enjoy these two mattes. And then this gold is like my favorite gold in my entire collection. I freaking adore the green shade. This like white gold green shade I also really like. Even the red, like, I just, chef's kiss. this palette, especially for just like if I want to feel pretty, this is the palette that I reach for, because I love it so much. And then kind of in that same vein, I have the Natasha Denona Gold palette. Now this is a palette, when this first released, I was like, who in the heck would waste their money on this palette? Like everything looks the same. It's $129. It's just a bunch of browns. Like who needs this? I needed this. That's who. I love this palette. When you see this palette in person, you can tell like the browns all have a different, like they truly are different. There's no two brown shades in this palette that like these would probably be the two closest, and even like in person, like they definitely are different tones of brown. This lime chrome shade, that's lime chrome, right? Or is it the bottom one that's lime chrome? Yeah, lime chrome. One of my favorite greens in my collection. I also love this like gold green shade. If I just want like a matte brown look, I can reach into this. It also has some neutrals for all over the lid. It's just a solid palette. I think it's discontinued. I've heard those rumblings. I haven't like personally done research myself, but I would be devastated to lose this or not have this in my collection. It is definitely an all-time fave. Okay, I will get this one out of the way because I already mentioned this, but the ABH Sultry palette. This is just such a solid palette, and surprisingly, this is another one. I feel like there's quite a few in this, like in this grouping of palettes where I was like, like skipped on it at first and then like came back around. I was like, yeah, actually I'll purchase that. This is one, again, when it released, I was like, that looks so dull and so boring, and like who would want that? And then I saw it in person at a Sephora, and I was just blown away at the swatches of like rose quartz, cyborg, even like steampunk. I loved the metallic shades in this palette, so I decided to purchase it, and I'm so glad that I did. This continues to be one of my most reached for palettes every single year for the last couple of years, and will likely continue to be because it is such a favorite. And then you guys probably knew if I was including the ABH Sultry, I couldn't not include the ABH Jackie. Now this is a palette I don't reach for quite as much because I love this palette so much. I do the thing where I feel like I can't use it unless it's like the most special of special occasions, but truly this is one of my favorite palettes in my collection as well. Again, I have my like browns, my staple browns that I love to have. I have this really beautiful inner corner highlight. The shade Zam is such a beautiful all over the lid, super punchy gold shade. We have a green, we have Sponsored, which is almost like a duochrome, like it's really beautiful. And then we even have some pinks and purples in this palette as well. So this is such a good one, definitely all-time fave. The BH Cosmetics Weekend Festival palette. This is another one that I was like, no, I don't need this palette because it's, this is a colorful palette that I'm including. But I was like, I don't need that palette because it's colorful and I won't use it. But then I purchased this because I used to be like a rave, like festival girl for like maybe 6 months of my life. And I was like, oh, I'm definitely gonna get this palette just to like honor that like time in my life. And then I came to really love the neutrals in this palette. My probably most repeated makeup look ever is using this shade and this shade to like create like the base of my look, and then popping this all over the lid, and this is the inner corner. Love this palette. Would never declutter this because I just like, it's such a staple. It's such good quality too. For I think I paid $18 or $20 for this, so happy that I purchased this. Has remained a favorite throughout the years. Another one that I slept on in the beginning was the Persona Identity 1 palette, and I really have come to love this palette. Again, very neutral, a little bit more cool toned, but the shimmers in here are just so smooth that they just work so well for my eyelids. I feel like sometimes can just look so crusty and crepey, but these shadows are just so smooth. The mattes are so easy to work with. This palette is just easy to look into it, create a quick look. It can really be like you can take it from like day to night, work appropriate, or a little bit more glamorous. I just absolutely adore this palette. I've raved about this palette for a long time on my channel, and it still continues to be a favorite. Okay, next up is my Huda Mercury Retrograde palette. I talk about this palette so often, and I always talk about how like, so Mercury Retrograde, if you're unfamiliar, is known to be a more chaotic time in your life. Like some people are said, like it's said that some like business people won't make decisions when we're in Mercury Retrograde because it's just like this chaotic time. And I am someone who always says like, I thrive in chaos, I love chaos. And now that I've like gone through all the things I've gone through in the last 6 months of my life, I'm like, oh my gosh, like I could like, please, like the chaos can just like stay as far away from me as possible. I just like want my inner peace, my zen, my like just no more chaos for my life. So I'm no longer considering this palette the mascot of my life because I do not want to live my life in constant Mercury retrograde. However, this palette is like super just like sentimental to me because I like just have, I don't know, for some reason I have all these feelings attached to this palette. I really do enjoy this palette. It is definitely more pinky, but I love that you have your neutrals mixed with your fun pops, and it's a very like approachable, colorful palette, if you will. I love the shade Gold Glitch for like a neutral gold. It's such a good gold. I also love Cosmic for like a really metallic light pink shade, but then you have your fun Nebula, Ultraviolet, and Mercury. I also really like Supernova and Galaxy. I love the shimmers in this. The shimmers are like obviously what steals the show in this palette for me, but I just this continues to be a favorite in my collection, not even necessarily for like the looks I create, but just I have so much nostalgic memories attached to this palette. This was my first like large Huda Beauty palette that I purchased. I love Huda shadows, so I had to include this one. And then speaking of Huda Beauty, I've also talked about this palette so often on my Oh my god, my heart is actually racing. I'm scared to look because there's already a broken shade in this palette, and I love this palette. You guys, I actually like feel like pain in my heart right now. It looks like there's like shadows sprinkled in it. Am I gonna cry? I think we're good. Okay, I have like 2-ish broken shades, which is fine. The one was already like broken-ish. Okay, we have like a decent press going. Like I can hold it up like this and it's not falling. I'm gonna have to be even more careful with this palette, but I feel like this is a palette I've accidentally thrown more than any other palette in my collection. Ironically, the last 2 palettes I'm sharing with you guys are broken. So I have the Huda Smoky Obsessions. I took this with me to Vegas in 2019. This arm is like shaking. I've only had coffee today, no food yet, so I feel like I'm getting a little crazy, a little shaky. Obviously crazy. So this I took with me to Las Vegas in 2019, and for some, like I use this every single day to do my makeup, and for some reason I was just, I'm gonna close this up right now. I was obsessed with the way that my makeup looked, and this has forever been a favorite of mine. I like that it's a little bit more cool toned, but it's really easy to create smoky eyes with this palette, and there's just something special about this palette. I have not used this silver shade a lot, but I would like to, so maybe I will try and pull this out. I need to get use out of this though, because now it's like so broken. I feel like eventually I'm going to have to declutter this. This is a palette going on my palettes on their last hurrah. If you have not caught that series, it'll be linked down below, but this is definitely an all-time fave and an all-time staple. All right, and then the 12th and final palette is another broken one. I accidentally basically threw this palette as well. It's the Natasha Denona Mini Nude palette. Such a good palette. If you just need like an easy palette to reach into and create really quick but beautiful looks, again, can take you from day to night, more office appropriate to like super glamorous. I absolutely adore the shade Sienna right here, which is a really beautiful kind of like green reddy brown shade, but this is just such a staple shade too. Just as like one shade in your crease, you're good to go. I love the shade Lumino for an inner corner highlight, and all around this is just like a favorite staple palette. I don't have a lot more to say about this. I've been raving about this palette for a long time. It's basically all I wore last summer. I anticipate I'll wear it a lot more this summer. I might even have to repurchase a replacement for this because I know I'll use it, and the fact that it's broken kind of annoys me. But those are my 12 all-time most favorite palettes throughout my collection. I would love to know again in the comments, what are your all-time favorites? Do we have any of the same all-time favorites? Do you agree, disagree? Let a girl know. Other than that, thank you so much for sticking around to watch today's video and for supporting my channel as you guys always do. I hope you are enjoying Palette Week, and I will catch you in tomorrow's video. Bye.